when we imagine a dream, what we're imagining is what we think the emotions will be that dream will give us. But ask yourself, is there something that God could do to give you the desire behind your dream?
Don't stop.
I know what I did to Dad.
Is there...
Hi, I'm Jenny. Welcome to my channel. Did you just know that God was going to do something? You were sure of it. You had the faith. You held on. You prayed. You believed. And then it didn't happen. The crushing disappointment and the sadness is so hard to navigate and understand. You're so disappointed, but you do not want to lose faith. I've totally been there. And today I want to talk to you about a time in my life that I went through something just like that. And I want to tell you about the revelations that I had, because I believe that they'll help carry you through any time of crushing disappointment that you encounter in the future. First, let's back up a little. In 2020, God helped us purchase our dream property. This I had been specifically praying for years, and everything on my prayer list he came through on. And even things that weren't on my prayer list, he came through on, and it was amazing. And to add on top of that, the land next door came for sale with more acreage and 4 houses next door, including one that we could live on. This expedited our ability to move out on the land. We move out there, we start remodeling the different rent houses. We move person after person we love into those houses, and we end up getting cows and chickens and pigs. Now, this was all a lot of fun, and it was a lot more work than we expected, but it was something we'd always dreamed of. We dreamed of having animals to feed and taking care of our own property and things like that. We had imagined our kids running and playing out on the acreage and having all sorts of fun. I had imagined the sense of peace and safety that it would give me to be out in the country and away from a lot of people. And that's what I had dreamed of. Well, let's fast forward to the reality of 2024. In 2024, I was pregnant with my 5th and final son. And the end of that pregnancy was extremely physically hard on my body. I had some health complications, which made it very painful to walk, and ended up delivering and having to get transferred to the hospital. It was a whirlwind. It was pretty difficult, but it wasn't as difficult as what was about to happen. Within 1 month, my beloved grandfather that lived out on the property with us passed away. Him and my grandmother were rocks in my life. And after he passed away, that was so emotionally hard on me. And within the next couple months, we were struck by a drunk driver on our way home from celebrating his first birthday without him. That sent us into a whirlwind of insurance battles. I had insomnia. I had panic attacks. We were going to physical therapy. I was arguing with insurance agents on top of our normal homeschool life, helping run rental properties, helping run a church and a school, and it just became too much. But it didn't stop there. Within the next couple of months, my father-in-law, who had been living with us for the past 5 years, ended up passing away as well. It was like one thing after another. And what had started out as like the perfect size home, after 5 years of little boys growing into bigger boys, it became tighter and tighter and tighter. We were on top of each other. I was constantly having to manage them arguing and fighting because there just wasn't space. 4 kids in one room. There was no room for any of their things, just their beds and their clothes. There was no room in the primary house for them to move or to play. And where the house was located was on the front corner of the property next to a busy road with no fence. There was a septic in the front yard, so they couldn't play in the front yard. There was a slope in the backyard with some sand and not much place for them to move there either. What had seemed like a dream property was quickly becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And now we needed to move my grandmother in with us. Now, one of the things that had happened over the past 4 years is that the equity that was in our property had really skyrocketed. Land and house values had really gone up since 2020. And so I started dreaming again. And I was like, what if we could trade the property we have now and sell it and use that equity to get property in a nearby state that's a lot cheaper. And you know what? I was able to find this amazing house that was twice as big, 3 times as much land for the amount of money that we could sell our current property for. And it would be in the middle of the acreage where I could just send the kids out to play. There was not this busy driveway with all these delivery trucks going to all these rent houses. It really felt like that this was the answer to my prayers. So we made an offer, and we offered about half of what this house was actually on the market for. And lo and behold, they took our offer. It was amazing. And we made it contingent on the sale of our land. So we put our land up for sale and we wait on the Lord. Well, lo and behold, someone came in and they made an offer on the house, and they accepted their offer if we couldn't sell our land, and we weren't able to sell our land. And so we lost the house and we lost the offer. And I was so confused. I was crushed. I was disappointed. And it almost felt like betrayal. You know what I mean? And I felt like he whispered to me and he said, Jenny, it's not about not getting disappointed. It's about knowing that I'm with you in the disappointment. And that was helpful, and that was true. And it is about him being with us. But in this case of the home, I was still really confused. It still did not relieve the amount of overwhelm and chaos that I was going through every day, being at home all day, almost every day, with 5 kids, managing this amount of space that was just not enough for us, and then needing to have my grandmother move in. So Casey starts building into our attic to make more room. And even with him building into the attic, there's still no place for my kids to safely play outside. There's not this sense of safety that I'd imagined living in the country. If I'm honest, living in town, when I had a fenced backyard, I could send them outside to play, and that was more restful than having to worry about them getting run over here in the country on this busy road and busy driveway. So it didn't relieve, even having a little bit more space indoors did not relieve the amount of emotional constant overwhelm that I had. Well, also, I'm beginning to realize that the pigs that we're raising, by the time it's all said and done, is $9 a pound for sausage. It's $3.50 to buy sausage at the store. And if I'm honest, my kids like the store sausage better than our own sausage. Not to mention the cows. The cows take so much time and energy and effort, and grass-fed, grass-finished beef just is not as good. I'm sorry. It's not unpopular opinion. I know that it's healthier. I know it has more protein. It doesn't taste as good. The chickens that we raised completely like from chicks and paid to feed them out, and then we butchered them ourselves, and it ended up being, if I didn't even take into account all of the money that it took to buy the butchering equipment, if I only counted like a fifth of that, it was still going to be $9 a chicken. $9 a chicken. And a whole chicken is a little harder to use than just like buying some organic chicken breast. I'm going to be honest with you. And so here we are spending all of this time, energy, and effort and more money to be able to purchase these animals and to raise them. And so this life that I had dreamed of, when I really sat back, I realized something really important. And I think that you will too. That when we imagine a dream, what we're imagining is what we think the emotions will be that that dream will give us, right? Like we imagine peace. We imagine less to do, less chaos, a slower life, less overwhelm, less fear, more safety, more satisfaction, more joy, more peace, more presence. That's what we're imagining. You see, there's a desire behind our desire, and that desire is an emotion. And God was gracious enough to answer my desire, which was to live in the country and this acreage and these things. But he knew that that wasn't going to really answer the desire behind my desire, which was the peace, the less to do, the slower life. It was actually more. And so when he didn't allow me to get this home with this more acreage and this bigger house, it's because he was protecting me from something I hadn't quite recognized yet. And that was in this season of life, that the time, energy, and effort that it takes to be a homesteader wasn't matching all the things that he was calling us to do. That it was actually adding more to our plate instead of adding less to our plate. And so he was gracious enough to not allow us to be able to get that big, beautiful property. I never would have thought that I would be happy with living in town. But what ended up happening is that there was a house that came for sale in town, and it was completely remodeled. It didn't need a ton of work. It was just as big as the house that was surrounded in that countryside. And this house was actually on the edge of town, and so it backs up to the country. But it had a wing for my grandmother to move in. It had space for all my boys to spread out. And it even had a nice 1980s pool in the backyard for them to enjoy. And so we ended up being able to buy a house in town with a lot more square footage, and in exchange for selling our land. And although I never would have imagined this, I never would have imagined moving back into town, I realized that at this season of life, that having the homestead and doing all the things was adding more to our plate and more chaos and more stress and more to manage. And really what I needed is to be able to have more peace inside my home, that we spend a lot of time inside our home. And I needed space to homeschool and space to cook and space to eat and space for my grandmother to move in. And that was what was important in this season. And that's what would actually give me the less to do and the less overwhelm and the less things going on. And so this is not at all what I imagined, but I am so happy. And so ask yourself, is there something that God could do to give you the desire behind your dream, right? So if your dream is to have a husband, then maybe the real desire is to feel accepted and loved and valued. And then ask yourself, could he make me feel accepted and loved and valued without giving me a husband? You know, if your desire is to have homestead, why do you want a homestead? Is it because you think that it'll give you a slower pace at life or more peace or more rest? And then ask yourself, can he give me more peace and more rest and a slower pace at life without giving me a homestead? And would that homestead actually give me all those things? One of the things I realized is that disappointment is grief, is a change in whatever is your normal or what your expectation is. And so it's like a loss of that expectation, a loss of what you thought the future would be like, a loss of a dream. And that it's okay to be disappointed. It's okay to process that disappointment. Grief is biblical. Jesus grieved over Lazarus. He didn't say, hey guys, get it together. You know that I can raise him from the dead. No, Jesus didn't invalidate people. He entered into the grief with them and he wept with them. And that's what we should do, is that we should grieve, we should weep, we should process the pain of not having the future that we expected. And then as we do that and as we grieve, we release, and we release it back to God, and he can hold our grief. It's okay to process the grief of disappointment. I think it is a lot less biblical to stuff it down, pretend like it's not there, go on, pretend like we're great. Because what we're really saying is, God, I don't trust you with my heart to be able to hold me during this hard thing that I'm going through. I think that you expect me to buck it up and take care of myself. And that comes from my wrong view of you. He actually loves to minister to us, and he wants to hold us and process in that grief with us, just like Jesus entered into the grief with Mary and Martha over Lazarus. And so what is it in your life that has been so hard and so disappointing? What were your real desires behind those petitions or those dreams? And can God answer those in a different way that might not be what you expected, that might still have some grief of disappointment behind it, but might be far better at answering the desires of the emotions behind what your real petitions are? Does that make sense? God wants to bring you the wholeness, the peace, and the joy behind your petitions more than he just wants to answer the petitions for you to find out that that's not actually what you really wanted to begin with. Sometimes he does it. Sometimes he still gives us the desires of our hearts to show us that that's not what we really want. But sometimes he allows us to get disappointed because he might be actually bypassing a whole bunch of time, energy, and effort if we would just trust him and trust that he knows better than we do, that he knows our hearts better than we do, that he knows what's going to fulfill us better than we do, that he knows how to bring us peace better than we do, and that his ideas are actually better than our ideas. Doesn't take away from how hard it is, but it brings joy in the morning. And so if you're walking through that dark valley, keep walking. You're going to come out on the other side. God has good plans for you. Have a beautiful life inside and out.